Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. You're watching World Today with me, Brendan Paul. Here are today's top stories. China's President Xi Jinping hosts a welcoming ceremony for US President Donald Trump ahead of a bilateral, including children. A new package of measurements has been announced by Brazil to prevent fuel price increases caused by the tensions in West Asia. The subsidy will be paid directly to gasoline producers and importers through oil regulator ANP. The Planning and Budget Ministry confirmed that the latest measures would have no fiscal impact to the country. The European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control (ECDC) recommended a strict 6-week quarantine for asymptomatic passengers and is prioritizing research on transmission routes and genomic analysis. According to experts in microbiology and molecular epidemiology, there is no indication that the hantavirus linked to the Honduras cruise ship is behaving differently from known strains, with evidence pointing to a single animal to human transmission event. French prosecutors requested a 7-year prison sentence for former President Nicolas Sarkozy in an appeal trial on charges that he sought Libyan financing for its 2007 election, as well as corruption, illegal campaign financing, and receiving misappropriated Libyan public funds. A lower court sentenced him to 5 years only over seeking to acquire the funding, but acquitted him of the 3 other charges. The news in full. Chinese President Xi Jinping held a grand welcome ceremony for US President Donald Trump today outside the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. At the invitation of Chinese President Xi, Trump is visiting China from 13th to 15th of May. The ceremony included a 21-gun salute, the national anthems, and a red carpet welcome, marking the beginning of high-stakes 3-day talks focused on trade, technology, and geopolitical tensions. This includes a landmark handshake with Xi Jinping and honor guards, as well as cheering children and the famous power play by Xi, where he paused on the steps up to the Great Hall of the People and took time to point out a number of different sights to his guests. It marks Trump's second state visit to the country and first for a US president since 2017. It was delayed from April at the Americans' request due to the West Asia conflict. The leaders last met in Busan, South Korea in October 2025, where they hit pause on an escalating tariffs war. Trade talks this time will see the US keen to extend China's suspension on exports control on rare earths agreed last time around, as well as potential deals on planes, agriculture, and energy, and foreign affairs, including Iran. The U.S. Senate has confirmed Kevin Warsh as the new Federal Reserve Chairman to lead a central bank which is grappling with intensifying inflation. The Senate voted 54 to 45 in favor of Warsh, with Republicans holding a slim majority and ensuring President Donald Trump's nominee will replace Jerome Powell. Once known as a monetary hawk against inflation, Warsh has shifted in line with Trump's push for lower interest rates that has posed an unprecedented challenge to the Fed's independence. The incoming Fed chair confirmed a 4-year term has promised to bring a regime change to the bank. But with inflation still above the Fed's long-term 2% target, Warsh is unlikely to convince fellow members of the bank's rate-setting committee to cut immediately. Warsh is taking over as the world's largest economy continues to reel from repeated economic shocks. In April, year-on-year inflation came in at a 3-year high of 3.8%, fueled in part by surging oil prices.
I'm not sure
The U.S. has renewed an offer of $100 million in aid for Cuba, pressuring its longtime nemesis to cooperate as it weathers an economic crisis that includes prolonged blackouts. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, speaking last week in Rome, said Cuba had rejected an offer of $100 million in assistance, an assertion denied by the government in Havana. The State Department publicly renewed the proposal, which comes after the U.S. piled new sanctions against key parts of Cuba's state-controlled economy. It said the decision rests with the Cuban government to accept the offer or deny critical aid and ultimately be accountable to the people for standing in the way of critical assistance. It added the support would include direct humanitarian assistance from the U.S. and funding for fast and free internet access. The department further noted that the U.S. is working to promote meaningful reforms in Cuba. At least 22 people, including 8 children, were killed as Israel intensified strikes on Lebanon, with several deadly raids hitting south of Beirut. The state-run national news agency said Israeli airstrikes had pounded around 40 locations in Lebanon's south and east. According to the health ministry, at least 10 people, including children, were killed in strikes on 3 South Lebanon villages. Earlier, it reported that 3 strikes on cars along or near the coastal highway around 20 to 30 kilometers from Beirut resulted in 8 fatalities. The ministry also reported 4 more people killed in strikes on 4 cars in South Lebanon's Tyre district and in Sidon, located around 40 kilometers south of Beirut. Since U.S. President Donald Trump announced on 16 of April that the leaders of Israel and Lebanon had agreed to a ceasefire, Israeli strikes have killed more than 400 people in Lebanon. In addition to launching heavy airstrikes, Israeli soldiers are operating inside an Israeli-declared yellow line, which runs around 10 kilometers north of the Israel-Lebanon border. The International Energy Agency, or IEA, said countries are tapping into oil inventories and strategic reserves at a record pace due to the unprecedented supply disruptions caused by the tensions in West Asia. It said global stocks were drawn down by a further 117 million barrels in April after 129 million barrel drawdown in March. The agency warned that rapidly shrinking buffers amid continued disruptions may herald future price spikes ahead. The IEA said in March that it would provide global markets with 400 million barrels from the emergency stocks of IEA members. Now, of that amount, around 164 million barrels have already been drawn. Surging prices are also weighing on the demand outlook as end users such as petrochemical and heavy manufacturers reduce usage. The agency now expects global demand to shrink by 2.4 million barrels per day in the second quarter, down from its forecast of 3.5 million barrels before the war erupted. Brazil has announced a new package of measures to temper fuel price increases caused by the tensions in West Asia. Now, the move comes ahead of elections in October, which are predicted to be tight. Brazil's government said it will provide a direct subsidy to gasoline producers and importers and later to diesel.
Que contribuam com o país, não com o governo, com o país. No momento de guerra, há de se haver esse espírito, o espírito cívico e o espírito da compreensão de que se há esforço por parte do poder público.
The subsidy will be first paid directly to gasoline producers and importers through oil regulator ANP. The Planning and Budget Ministry noted that the latest measures would have no fiscal impact. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is running for a 4th term in office. Polls show he faces stiff competition from his main rival, Senator Flávio Bolsonaro. The pro-government camp is thus on the lookout for anything that might help their cause.
Padatkan komputer untuk lebih penjimatan.
French authorities have allowed asymptomatic passengers to leave a British cruise ship, saying a gastrointestinal virus was behind an outbreak of sickness that came after an elderly man died of a heart attack. Earlier, authorities ordered a lockdown for the more than 1,700 passengers and crew on the Ambition vessel, which was anchored in the port of Bordeaux. They insisted there was no connection with the hantavirus outbreak on the MV Honduras cruise ship. The local government and regional health agency said testing confirmed the outbreak on the Ambition was a gastrointestinal infection of viral origin. They added there were no severe cases and asymptomatic individuals are now free to disembark. However, those infected are required to remain in isolation on board. News that a 92-year-old British passengers had died on the ship as dozens of others suffered upset stomachs initially caused concern. However, health authorities said the man suffered a heart attack and his death appeared unrelated to the illnesses. 8 people infected with the hantavirus outbreak aboard the MV Honduras cruise ship have tested positive for the Andes virus, the only strain transmitted between humans. They were among the 11 cases reported to the agency so far. The World Health Organization said 8 cases were laboratory confirmed for Andes virus infection, 2 are probable and 1 case remains inconclusive and undergoing further testing. The case listed as inconclusive is an American passenger repatriated to the U.S. who is currently asymptomatic and undergoing further testing after 1 positive and 1 negative results. It maintained its assessment of the public health risks from the outbreak at moderate for those who were on the ship and low for the rest of the world. 3 people from the ship have died since it set sail from Argentina on 1st April for a cruise across the Atlantic Ocean. 2 of the victims had confirmed Andes virus infections and the 3rd is listed as a probable case. Meanwhile, expert microbiology and molecular epidemiology Andreas Hofer confirms there is no indication the hantavirus linked to the Honduras cruise ship is behaving differently from known strains, which evidence pointing to a single animal-to-human transmission event. Hofer was speaking at a virtual press conference held by European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control (ECDC).
Preliminary investigations based on the whole genome sequencing that is available to us suggest that there are no indications that this virus is acting any different from the known virus circulating in some regions of the world. All sequences obtained to date are virtually identical, which means that there was likely only a single transmission event from an infected animal to a human.
The ECDC recommended a strict 6-week quarantine for asymptomatic passengers and is prioritizing research on transmission routes and genomic analysis. The World Health Organization said on Tuesday more cases were expected from the cluster that broke out on a luxury cruise ship during a polar expedition that departed from Argentina, but it stressed that this was nothing like COVID and was not a pandemic. And still ahead, gunshots fired after Philippine senator taken away from Senate. Stay with us. Last 16 with the 7-4.
Barcelona has approved a plan to double the city's tourism tax beginning April.
Marine Affairs and Fisheries Ministry. Yes, as Thailand as well. There are touring spots in Mexico.
And welcome back. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim has expressed Malaysia's vehement objection to Norway's unilateral decision to revoke the export license for the Naval Strike Missile System and its associated launcher systems. Datuk Seri Anwar said the matter was conveyed in a telephone conversation with Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. He said Malaysia has honoured every obligation under the procurement contract since 2018, scrupulously, faithfully and without equivocation. He said he made it plain that this decision will have grave consequences for Malaysia's defence operational readiness and the littoral combat ship modernisation programme. The Premier further noted that it will also undoubtedly carry broader ramifications for the regional balance. The Norwegian Foreign Ministry has reportedly withdrawn several export licenses related to certain technologies as part of the country's move to tighten export controls. Philippine Senator Ronald De La Rosa was taken to a different part of the Senate building and a loud noise was heard in a nearby hallway on Wednesday. Volleys of gunshots were heard at the Philippine Senate and people were told to run for cover as chaos mounted in anticipation of an attempt to arrest the top senator wanted by the International Criminal Court, ICC. It was unclear what was happening or who fired the shots. More than 10 military personnel in camouflage fatigues had earlier arrived at the Senate building, some carrying assault rifles.
They retreated at the back and then started firing indiscriminately into the air. Now,
Seized unsealing of an arrest warrant. The warrant dated November and made public on Monday seeks the arrest of the former police chief on charges of crimes against humanity, the same crimes 81-year-old Duterte is accused of as he awaits trial in The Hague following his arrest last year. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. called for calm after gunshots were fired at the Senate, insisting his government had no involvement in the incident and did not know who was responsible. Marcos, in a video message, also said there was no instruction to arrest Senator Ronald De La Rosa.
Wala pong instruction kahit na kanino na hulihin si Senator Bato. At ang nangyari, ang NBI, sinabihan ko nung lumabas yung resolution ng Supreme Court, mga alas 4 yung kaninang hapon, ay sinabi ko, umalis na kayo dyan. At nag-comply naman sila. Hindi po gobyerno ang gumawa nito. Walang pumasok na tigalabas, na sundalo, na militar, na NBI sa Senado. Hindi po natin alam kung sino yun na sumubok na pumasok at saka dahil doon ay nagkaputukan.
Indonesia will re-evaluate its visa-free entry policy for visitors from Southeast Asia following several arrests involving foreigners believed to be conducting illegal gambling and online fraud activities in the country. According to the head of Indonesian immigration, Hendarsa Marantoko, the criminal activity in question raises serious concerns and requires a re-evaluation of existing policies. Last week, authorities arrested more than 500 individuals from Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Laos and Myanmar in 2 separate raids involving an online gambling syndicate in Jakarta, as well as a fraud operation in Batam, Riau Islands province. The investigation found that most suspects involved in illegal gambling centers in Jakarta entered Indonesia using visa-free facilities or arrival permits. In 2022, the Indonesian government has announced the reinstatement of a special free visa scheme for ASEAN citizens. The public prosecutor requested 7 years in prison, a €300,000 fine and a 5-year ban from holding public office against former French President Nicolas Sarkozy during his appeal to overturn a conviction for criminal conspiracy. Sarkozy was sentenced to a 5-year jail term last year after being convicted of criminal conspiracy between 2005 and 2007 for having let close aides get in touch with people in Libya to try and obtain campaign financing. The conviction made Sarkozy the first post-war president of France to be imprisoned, a stunning downfall for a man who led the country from 2007 to 2012. He was incarcerated in October at La Santé prison in Paris and was freed 3 weeks later after a court agreed to release him under judicial supervision, which included a ban on leaving France. Sarkozy denied the charges and claimed his innocence. His lawyers are set to start pleading on 27th of May, while a ruling is expected on 30th of November. Long lines of cargo trucks remain stranded on roads near La Paz and El Alto as protesters maintain blockades demanding the resignation of Bolivian President Rodrigo Paz. The indefinite roadblocks in place for a week have cut off key supply routes in and out of La Paz and the country's northern region. Residents were facing shortages of food and medical supplies, according to authorities and local groups, while truck drivers said they had been stuck for days with limited access to food and water.
Aquí estamos tratando de preparar el almuerzo. Ya estamos de la anterior semana, del día martes. Estamos aquí. Un vecino nos ha regalado víveres, nos ha regalado agua. Aquí estamos con muchas necesidades.
Demonstrators at a blockade said they were protesting against government policies they say are hurting Bolivians, including privatization measures and poor quality fuel. And in sports, Manchester City slice Arsenal's league lead to 2 points. Stay tuned. We begin our sports segment with some local news. Selangor FC advanced to the ASEAN Club Championship ACC final after defeating Nam Ding FC 2-0 for a 4-1 aggregate victory in the semi-final second leg at Tin Chung Stadium in Ninh Bình, Vietnam. Selangor under head coach Kim Panggon opened the scoring through Gregor Moraes, who converted a penalty in the 38th minute after VAR review confirmed Mitchell Dykes had fouled Muhammad Abu Al-Nadi. Nam Ding thought they had equalized in the 51st minute through Lem Ti Fong, but the goal was disallowed after VAR showed Persi Tau was offside. Moraes then struck again in the 90th minute to seal Selangor's victory and confirm the Malaysian side's place in the final. Selangor had also won the first leg semi-final 2-1 at the Petaling Jaya City Council Stadium in Kelana Jaya last week. Awaiting Selangor in the final are defending champions Buriram United, who edged Johor Darul Tazim JDT 4-3 on aggregate, despite losing 2-1 at home in the second leg of the semi-final. At Chang Arena in Thailand, JDT took the lead through Bergson da Silva's penalty in stoppage time of the first half after VAR confirmed the collision involving Marcos Guilherme and Buriram goalkeeper Neil Etheridge. Marcos Guilherme then levelled the aggregate score at 3-3 with JDT's second goal in the 62nd minute. However, Buriram regained the lead in extra time through Kingsley Schindler, before the hosts were reduced to 9 men following red cards to Guilherme Bissoli and Goran Kausic. Despite their numerical disadvantage, Buriram held on to secure a place in the final, with the first leg scheduled for 20th May and the return leg on 27th May. In EPL, Manchester City kept the pressure on Premier League leaders Arsenal with a comfortable 3-0 win over Crystal Palace, trimming the gap at the top of the table to 2 points as the title race sprints towards its conclusion. Pep Guardiola's men showed no sign of resignation, and Antoine Semenyo put them ahead in the 32nd minute when Phil Foden's crafty back heel set him up to slot a shot into the bottom left corner. Omar Mamouche doubled City's lead in the 40th minute when Foden's touch on a cross landed at the Egyptian's feet and he shot on the return back into the far corner. It marked the first time the seldom used Foden has provided multiple assists in the first half of a Premier League game in his career. Savinho added the third goal in the 84th minute when he latched onto a through ball from Ryan Cherki and finished with a left-footed shot from the edge of the 6-yard box. City played with authority and control to lift them onto 77 points, while Arsenal have 79, with 2 games remaining for each. Had City lost or drawn against Palace, Arsenal would have clinched their first league title in 22 years, with a victory over already relegated Burnley next Tuesday. That's it from us. Do join us again tomorrow afternoon at 12:30 p.m. on TV2 and Saluran Berita RTM for your daily world updates. Alternatively, you can also stream us live on RTM Click's website and mobile application. Now, before we leave, let's take a look at Gurihan River Citizen Park in South Korea as it turned into golden labyrinth of canola blooms. Till then, Salam Malaysia Madani, take care and goodbye.